Hello, good evening, everyone. So it's 7:30 and faculty has arrived, Mr. Anjan Babu. I welcome all of you to our review session, and thanks for participating wholeheartedly. And I want to give a special thanks to Anjan for taking his time out and coming again to clarify the doubts of all our participants. So Anjan, thank you very much. And we all have got your feedback and your reply in that. Still, we have got more questions and people have shared those questions with you. We can start with that.
Yes.
And as he starts completing other questions, whatever you have, you can unmute and ask on the thing and on the same flow. And Anjan Babu, how much time you will be taking till 8 or till you will be taking a little more?
I think with the questions that were sent on WhatsApp group, it can be completed by 8. But if
Okay.
additional questions are there, it may take some time.
Sure, fine. So we'll have some additional questions also because people may get triggered with some questions.
Okay.
So kindly be considerate on that. Thank you.
All right. Yeah. Okay.
And after this, we will have Kusum session on summarizing today's session, right?
Yeah, in the morning, whatever Divya had done, actually Kusum will be going to redo the thing in her own this one, and that will be for half an hour. It is meant for specifically for those people who couldn't make it in the morning. Yeah.
All right. Shall I begin, sir?
Yeah.
Okay. A very good evening to everyone. Last time where we left off, I received a lot of questions on volatility. So first thing is I would like to address that error that we had made in the previous day's calculation. That is, when I was calculating, I had taken average instead of standard deviation. So Ravindranath sir, my screen share is disabled. I request you to enable. I'm trying to share.
I will enable it.
Yeah.
It is actually enabled. Can you just try once now?
Now it's enabled. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Okay. So as I was saying, last time when we were doing the case study calculation, I had made an error of taking average. So the actual method would be like the log normal returns still remains the same. There is no change here, but the daily volatility is not just the average of log normal returns, it's the standard deviation. And I have used the Excel formula of standard deviation, and the annual volatility is nothing but daily volatility multiplied by the square root of time. So this is that continuous standard deviation calculation for the year. Now, hope everyone has looked through this sheet, and that doubt which was there and the mistake that I had made is now clarified for everyone. Now, with that being said, I would like to take the questions that were posted in the WhatsApp group today. Let me share.
This Excel file is already shared, Anjan, or you will be sharing?
Yes, it is already shared. It was shared yesterday itself.
Achha,
Yesterday
in that, the
evening.
corrected one was there, standard
Yes.
deviation?
Yes, the corrected one is there in that. And I had provided what is that? A little guide also on that. In the email, I think I had sent, when I had sent to all of you, it was there. Anyway, let me just take up the Q&A that were provided in the WhatsApp group today. All right. So I have the, based on, there were around 6 questions provided on the WhatsApp group, 6 to 7, and based on the topic of the questions, I have divided the questions. Some questions require the similar or same answer. Okay. So first question was, how does one identify target of for considering historical volatility? Say for a company like Oyo, which is unique in its business model, how do you take a comparable for the same? So this question, and along with another question, which also talks about comparability, how does one calculate volatility for an unlisted company when all comparable companies are also unlisted? Again, I'm assuming that it is a unique company. That is why we are not finding a comparable out in the market. All right. So the first thing that I would like to say is when we were it is good that we are having this Q&A session, because in yesterday's day before yesterday's time of 1.5 hours, there were many nitty-gritties that could not be talked about in detail. If I had taken up those topics in detail, the time allotted for the session wouldn't have been enough. So one of those important points was how to take a comparable. In our case study that we had taken, the case study told it is a technology company, and uh, we went ahead and took TCS as an example of a technology company and went ahead with our calculation. But I can see now where a bias may come out. What is that bias? The bias is very simple. A comparable company need not be in the same industry. So when I look at the question here, OYO, the first thing that probably comes to mind is the hotel sector or technology sector. So I can see where that bias is. So the first thing that I would like to put it out there for everyone's understanding is, to find a comparable, the comparable need not be in the same industry. What is volatility at the end of the day? Volatility is nothing but a measure of returns, right? How dispersed the returns are. And returns basically in the financial management or in any valuation field, we should know that once there is returns, there is a inverse risk as well. So OYO need not have a comparable in the same industry, but we need to understand the risk profile of OYO or any other company with a unique business model, find out the risk factors, and using those risk factors as a metric, we need to find a comparable company. Now, what is a metric for a risk factor? One good metric is the return on equity used in the valuation report of the company. See, option valuation is just the second step. The first step always has to be the valuation report of the company. So we will have to do a thorough study of the valuation report of the company and understand what are the discounting factors that they have used. Discounting factors meaning the expected return on investment used while arriving at the valuation of the company. Now that you have an expected rate of return on the investment, we need to, shortlist some of the publicly traded companies with the same expected rate of returns in the market for those companies. So once we do that, we have a short list of companies. Now, after shortlisting these companies, we need to see what are the growth potentials of these companies. Like what is the market size that they have captured and they intend to capture? What is the growth rate of the industry of our comparable as against the company that we are valuing? So once we are able to find a Goldilocks region where there is the growth potential as well as the risk parameter matching, we may use the comparable of that company for historical volatility calculation. Now, next thing is, there is, in case you want to stick to a particular industry, okay, the first Goldilocks concept, let us forget about that. Just in case you want to stick to a specific definition of an industry, what happens is, here you need a lot of professional judgment in the sense, when we say, example, the concept of a technology company. There are thousands of technology companies out there. You can call Ola or Uber as a technology company, or you may call even Infosys as a technology company, but both are very different in its operations and the use of technology by itself. So that is where, if you go for a specific definition, you should, if you go for a more generalized definition, you need to use a lot of professional judgment. Professional judgment in the sense, the future predictability of the industry and the future growth of the industry. But at the end of the day, my personal suggestion as a professional would be to look at the risk parameters as well as the growth parameters. If the risk and the growth parameters come together, then we can use that. So to give you a more convincing argument as to why we should forget about industry and we should only look at risk and growth parameters is, at the end of the day, uh, investors are looking to get a particular percentage of return. They want their money to work and get back their money, right? It doesn't matter which industry. For a equity investor, all they want is a return on their investment. If you find there is a particular risk, whatever may be a risk, whatever may be the business model of the company, it will always have a certain amount of risk, and there'll always be a expectation on the return on the investment for the risk borne, and that can be a very good comparable for you as a metric for comparing with other companies. I hope I have answered this question. In case if you have not completely understood, please put something on the WhatsApp group. If you have not understood what I've told, you can provide your comments here. All right. Thank you, sir. Next, I shall move on. I see more questions on the chat box. I shall take it up as soon as I complete the next question. Okay, this question seems to be with regard to the COVID-19 problem that we have now and the stock market crash because of COVID-19. The question goes like this: we take volatility of the comparables for arriving at, okay, to what extent or weightage of current volatility on BSE or NSE stocks we experience for valuation of exercisable option for next 2 years from now at least be considered. So it's a very relevant and a future looking questions. A lot of academicians are actually in fact thinking about this. It's an ongoing topic of discussion on many forums. Now, when we look at data, say 1 year down the line, if we are finding out historical volatility calculations, we find a lot of anomaly in the current years, the ongoing periods, return on investments or changes in the prices. One thing we should always know is volatility is nothing but dispersion of returns for a given security. And the second thing we should know is we are not option traders, but we are valuers of options. For option traders, this question is very important. But for valuers of options, the one best friend of ours that we have with us is experience and professional judgment. You need not stick to the historical volatility calculation that we do. You need not consider certain periods, and the assumptions that you make, say 1 year down the line, you're making a historical volatility calculation. You can say in our volatility calculation, we have ignored the time period between December and May because the volatility was an anomaly and we do not see the volatilities in the future to come in that way. So we have ignored those volatilities. That is something that you can do. And what am I basing this on? I'm basing this on the recent observable example for this is the 2007 stock market crash due to recession. So after the 2007 crash, what many valuers did was they assigned less weights or they ignored those historical volatilities in case of options expiring in a short-term period, that is around a maximum a year or 2 years or 3 years. But beyond 4 5 years, what they did was they respected the fact that stock market crash happened in 2007, and they considered it as a part of a volatility calculation as well, because they understood it is a cyclical phenomenon in the economy. So you can say the nearest example for us would be the stock market crash of 2007, but it is not necessarily the perfect example, because the pandemic of COVID-19 may be a one-off thing forever in the future, or it may be something of an regularity. First we start with COVID-19, or we may find some other virus coming up in the future, and the next virus may not cause such a stock market crash because of our COVID-19 experience. So these are all very new things for us. But for us as valuers, the one good protection is we can always use our professional judgment and consider some numbers and not consider some numbers. But if we are going to do that, we should be able to provide good justifications in our valuation report. Um, Next thing is the concept of historical volatility versus implied volatility. Um, Now, in case if you feel that the historical volatility, that is whatever we do as a calculation, clearly presents a wrong picture of today's scenario of volatility, you can always choose to go for implied volatility, calculating implied volatility. Yesterday's scenario, yesterday we could not calculate implied volatility. Do you want me to show you how implied volatility is provided? You can, if you want me to show the a calculation of implied volatility, please press
Please,
yes or check.
Please
please
show
do.
us.
Please do.
Okay, okay, all right. So as I told you yesterday itself, implied volatility cannot be calculated directly. It has to be calculated only indirectly. Okay. Historical volatility can be calculated directly by looking at past stock market changes in prices. But implied volatility has to be calculated only as a what you can say, an understanding of the pulse of the market. That is what implied volatility is. So I'll quickly show you how implied volatility works. I'll just take yesterday's example itself. I'll calculate it for TCS itself. So I'm going to use the Black-Scholes model to calculate the um, uh, implied volatility. And implied volatility, in my understanding, can never be taken for a period of more than 3 months, because especially in India, the options F&O, the exchange traded options expire within 3 months. So we cannot get a data beyond 3 months. But in your professional judgment, if you feel that this implied volatility is showing the pulse of the market, maybe for the next 1 or 2 years, you can definitely go for this. All right, so let me just take example of TCS. Okay, let me go to moneycontrol.com. I think my screen is shared. Yes. Yeah. So let me go to TCS stock. Okay, so if I scroll down here, I can get the quotes on the F&O market. And let me take 25th June as the expiry and a call option. And let us take an example of a strike price of, say, 1,700. Let us see if there are enough volumes. Okay, there's not enough volume. Let me change the price so that we get a very good example. current trading price is 1,800. Maybe if I go little steeper, we will be able to get a good quote. Okay, I think this is a good quote. With the current option, which has an expiry of 25th June 2020, uh, at a strike price of 1,950, has a quote of 110 rupees in the market. Okay, now let us take these inputs in our own Black-Scholes model calculations. The strike price is 1,950. Volatility is our assumption. We can put any volatility. I'll just take it as 20%. There's nothing to worry about it. You can assume anything, because at the end of the day, that number is going to change, because we will be calculating the volatility in the market. So the term is 25th June expiry. So today's date is 15th May. And 25th June 2020. So our term is nothing but
Anjan, please also change the stock price.
I will change. I'll change. Yeah. So, and the current stock price is 1893.30. Okay, and I am assuming the risk-free rate is 6.14 only, but for more accurate calculation, I should actually be taking the risk-free rate for the next 1 month, the treasury bill rate for 1 month, but I am just assuming the whatever risk-free rate we have taken, and I am assuming the market is also assuming the same thing. Now, the call price at our assumption of volatility of around 20% is 30.82. But the call price in the market is in reality 110.40. All right. So now this call price has to be 110.40 after altering this figure of volatility. All right. So for this, I'll use the goal seek function in the Excel. So we have to set the cell value to 110. Okay, sorry, this value to 110, and the cell value should be 110.40, and it should change volatility figure to arrive at the same. All right. So for the call price to be quoted at 110.40, the volatility in the market is 51.8%. All right. So this is nothing but implied volatility. This is the volatility in the market. Now, obviously, today's volatility is very high because of the market uncertainties. But if we do volatility calculations, say once all of these situation is blown over, maybe 6-7 months down the line, you can observe the volatility will be around 15, 20, 25 to 30% maximum. 30% on really those days where there's a lot of changes, right? So we have to basically, this is our implied volatility calculation, and during our valuation assignments, just in case for certain stocks, if we believe in our professional judgment, okay, the historical volatility has too many anomalies, and as of today, the market has corrected this stock. You know, there is a lot of correction that has happened in this stock, and in fact, the current stock price is very close to the intrinsic value of the company. then we may even choose to use implied volatility in our calculations. All right. So this is implied volatility. Now, getting back to what question I was initially answering is the COVID-19 problem on taking volatility. Yeah, so why I talked about implied volatility is if historical volatility has too many anomalies in it, then we may even choose to go for implied volatility, given that the market price of the share is close to the intrinsic value or the intrinsic fair value of the company. Now, in the future, we may even consider respecting COVID-19, the volatility that we got during COVID-19 by assigning it a weight, because we may expect these kind of things. If we expect these kind of things to happen in the future, we may even assign it a weight, but may not be an equal weight in consideration with the rest of the data that we have. All right, so hope I have answered the question here. If I have answered, please type yes in the chat box. If you want more, yeah, all right, I think we can move ahead. Anyone else have any question? Okay, I don't think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, tell me, sir.
Anjan, okay,
Yes.
I just asking whether there's an approximation. I saw the calculation. We have the BSE volatility, right?
Oh, you mean to say India VIX, the volatility index of the stock market?
Yeah, Sensex. Whatever.
So that is implied volatility, but it has been given weightage for all the Nifty 50 stocks. It is in fact
correct.
implied volatility itself.
I understand. So, so if I take the volatility of the Sensex or Nifty or whatever, and I apply the beta, will I get an close enough?
So here's what would mean if you're going to take the India VIX. There's nothing wrong in taking India VIX as a measure for our volatility. What you're saying if you're taking India VIX is, I believe the volatility is weighted in the same manner that a national stock exchange.
No, I'm taking this. I'm taking the India mix.
Yeah.
And then I'm applying the beta to that.
Okay.
Will I get the stock volatility?
I have not yet considered that. You take volatility and apply beta to it. Okay. We can do that, but I do not know if it will stand as a very good assumption in the valuation report.
I agree. I just wanted to
and so I first, sir, I would like to understand, is this a case of an unlisted or a listed company? Because since we have a beta for the stock, I just wanted to know how the beta would probably be arrived. Because
okay, the purpose is that beta and all that is sometimes available. So if you look at, I mean, at least it used to be in Morningstar and all that, beta of a particular stock is available.
of listed entities, we get beta. And
yeah, only listed. I'm talking only about listed.
Okay. In case we are using listed entities, India VIX will not be a good measure because we can get the implied volatility of that stock right away. But if it is not traded in the F&O segment, then we will not get the implied volatility. We will have to go for India VIX and multiply it by beta, as you have told. But only in the scenario where it doesn't have an F&O market. Like if it is a small cap stock or a mid cap stock where it is not traded in the F&O, then we can go for India VIX.
Just wanted to add here or just share the thought. The beta is with respect to the share price. The adjustment will open only to the share price. Not sure if the volatility will get adjusted to the stock volatility by multiplying beta to the India VIX. Will that be a correct measurement or a tool to multiply beta to the India VIX to get the stock volatility? Beta is a measurement for adjusting the stock price. That is the stock risk or
so
the industry rate of return.
Yes. I would like to answer that. So basically, beta is the sensitivity of the stock price to the market. Now, what is market at the end of the day? It is the all of the other stocks in the market. Now, when we multiply beta with volatility, what we are saying is volatility is nothing but risk measure. Beta is also a risk sensitivity measure. So it should hold good. It is not necessarily limited to the stock prices. It's only a reactionary of how this stock will react to the changes in the market. It is not necessarily applied on the stock prices itself, but it is just a measure of systematic risk of the company. So it would hold good. If you say beta of 1.5, you're basically saying the stock is 1.5 times riskier compared to the market. So
You're correct,
that means, yeah,
you're correct.
that means
Beta is
basically
actually-
the volatility will also be 1.5 times. Yeah. All right. So can I move on to the next question? Next questions. Yeah. All right. So the next question is, it's more of a calculation based question. In theory, it has been said that we can use exponential form to the power of risk-free rate minus time multiplied by time. But in real world, this changes to e to the power of mu multiplied by t. And mu is nothing but r minus sigma square, sigma to the power of 2. Okay, I believe it is should be time. Okay, and if there is a dividend yield, then it is okay. Is this correct? Can you help me confirm what to use? All right. So basically, theory and real world are pretty much the same. That is one thing I'd like to clear it off. So I think you are referring to the binomial tree method on how we have used this figure A is nothing but the factor, I think, that is being referred to. So e to the power of RT will work as a formula if there is no dividend in the first place. But if there is dividend, what will happen is the time value of money will not depreciate at the risk-free rate of return anymore. Because there is a dividend yield, it depreciates at a lower rate. And time will also remain the same. You know, the concept of time in e to the power of RT doesn't change. Time will have to be expressed in number of years itself. And here in our formula, it is time per step, you know, and this time per step is also expressed in terms of years itself. So e to the power of RT still holds good. It's just that R has to be R minus T and not just RT. Okay. This concept of sigma multiplied by time, square root of time, is used only for standard deviation purposes, and also to calculate up and down swings. Why we are doing this volatility multiplied by square root of time is basically to what you can call annualize the whole thing, you know, to put it across various time zones. That is why we do square root of time. Otherwise, e to the power of RT still remains same. If there is dividend yield, R minus D has to be done. Okay, so here I'm going to repeat whatever I've written in the answer as well. We have used e to the power of RT. Risk-free rate is modified as R minus D because future value will depreciate only by R minus D % per annum when there are dividend payouts. T has been modified to include time per interval in years in binomial model. Was I able to answer this?
Anjan,
Yes, sir.
can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, it's not about T adjustment. I was adjusting the R itself.
Right.
When the theoretical in the real world, when it's the difference between real world and theoretical stuff is R is reduced by R minus sigma square by 2. R is reduced, the whole thing is multiplied by D. T doesn't change. So the problems are we can do e power RT and then there's an option of e power r minus sigma square by 2, that, and then into multiplied by t. So I was just asking, have you come across earlier, because theory talks about both options. So I wanted to hear from you.
Actually, sir, I have not come across that. I think my knowledge is limited to this only. I have
No,
actually
you have
not.
much.
Pardon, sir?
You have very good knowledge. I'm not doubting that.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, so I have not actually come across that particular formula, but for me, this formula logically sits very well inside my mind, because e to the power of rt is nothing but discounting of future value. And while exponential form takes care of continuous discounting, R and T are the risk-free rates and time. So sigma, if you're bringing sigma into the picture, it basically means you're also bringing in volatility into picture. I think what you may be trying to refer sigma over there is the changes in risk-free rate, if I'm not wrong. If you want to consider changes in risk-free rate also, probably then we will have to bring in sigma. That can also be worked out, sir, because what you have told, I didn't think of it this way while answering the question. Sigma is nothing but rho, that is the Greek rho, which is nothing but a signifier of percentage changes in the risk-free rate. In case if we assign 1% or 2% as sigma, we can find those. In fact, we should consider that, I believe, in case of long-term options like ESOPs. Let me see if I can share a reworked Excel sheet, which also includes sigma or rho as a variable. We can do that.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Okay, next question is, it has been said that in traditional model work, when number of steps are large, so what would be the number of steps we need to use ensure model? So, okay, I think there are two questions nestled in this. First question is, how many number of steps in a binomial model would be good enough to provide us the integrity of calculation? Now, see, when we talk about binomial model, one thing we need to remember is our objective in binomial model is not to equalize the option value that we get out of binomial model with that of option value of a Black-Scholes model. The reworked binomial model, which came later to Black-Scholes model. The original binomial model was there from a long time, but the reworked binomial model was released in 1979, while Black-Scholes was released in 1973. This reworked binomial model solved many of the deficiencies that were there in the older binomial model. Now, what were the positives of the new binomial reworked model was, we had the ability to dictate volatility at each and every step of the way. All right. So this is especially useful if we are valuing unlisted entities which do not have liquid markets. There are no ready markets to liquidate the shareholdings. And because of this, we can assume the volatility impacts at a limited number of steps as against a daily or every interval change in volatility. Now, in our case study that we had done, we had assumed 100. That was, a random assumption because the case study did not have multiple information that would allow us to, take informative decisions. Now, I have just put across in the same Excel model. I am just, working with the same numbers, but I have made a 100-step binomial into a 4-step binomial. Okay. And here I have assumed volatility, the same volatility, but I have made it as a 4-step and the time remains the same. This is the 1st April 2024 maturing option. Now, when we did 100 step, the answer came to 178.22. Okay. If I do a 4-step, my answer comes to 181.03. That is the option value. But I will show you one important thing of binomial tree model that gets neglected most of the time is you can assume volatility differently at each step. Okay, now say for the first step with a time of 0.98, which is close to 1 year, the first step is from 0 year to 1 year. I will assume the current volatility that is there in the market. For the second step, I may even assume a higher volatility. And I can see my option price going up, because of increase in volatility. Then in step 3, I will assume a lower volatility. And we can see the call option price dipping down. And in step 5, again, I'll probably come to 26.2%. So this is the freedom that binomial tree model allows us to do. What are these volatilities based on? Again, the multiplicity of things that we just talked about. Say for step 1, we can use implied volatility because it is a shorter term. Maybe within the next 3-4 months, you have the first interval in your binomial tree option valuation model. We can use the implied volatility. Then going forward, you may see that you may change the volatility to historical volatility. So you can use multiple volatilities in binomial tree model. But the problem with binomial tree model is, in case if we have poorly built the Excel model like how it is here, where every step of the way, if I add any rows or something, the whole formula changes, it becomes very difficult. But if we have a VBA built coded Excel sheet, we can actually define volatility for all the 100 or 150 or 400 steps that we take, and have different volatilities for each of these steps. So this is the beauty of binomial tree model. And the second part of this question, which talks about what should be the minimum number of steps. In the Excel sheet volatility consideration, we have considered 252 trading days, but the time considered in binomial model is 360 days. The effect of sigma square root of t has 2 different time periods. Is the difference of timelines on the measures correct? All right. So one thing we should always remember is volatility is just a input for our option valuation calculation. We choose volatility for its absolute characteristic and not for the characteristic of its time. I mean, not the characteristic of time that is attached to it. So what I mean to say that is, if we have arrived at 26.2% or 25% as our historical volatility, in our report, we can always put across it is a volatility of 1 trading year, which consists of 252 days. While in our option valuation, we have considered this being an unlisted company. We have considered it for 1 year completely. So it's just a one-liner assumption, but we can go ahead and do it more and more accurately. We can consider 360 trading days itself for every year of historical volatility. That means do not stop at 1st April or something. Go back until we get 360 days of standard the distribution of returns. We need not stop at 252 days. We can go drag the standard deviation formula till 360th cell. But one thing we should always keep in mind, volatility, whatever we are going to use in the valuation report, will not be the same as actual volatility that is going to come forward. That means our first criminal mistake was to consider historical volatility in the first place. Why I say criminal mistake is because we do not have the ability to predict the actual volatility. So we can say we have considered 252 trading days of volatility as 1 year volatility of this particular stock, or we can take 360 trading days also. So it depends on the kind of comfort you're looking at. So hope I have been able to answer that.
Can I answer that, Anjan, on that?
Yes,
Is that
yes,
okay?
sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Two pieces. This is my thought process, and I would leave it to the judgment.
Yes, sir.
The first part which you have answered regarding the number of steps,
Yeah.
the entire binomial model got simplified in terms of e power
Yeah.
RT minus e power sigma root T divided by, that is U factor and the D factor,
Yeah.
under the assumption that T is very small. Otherwise, it won't work. That was the underlying principle of the binomial model. So that's why I presume that the number of steps were important. And I'm probably that's why I asked what is the practice. So
Yes.
from the principle of binomial model as a principle to work, the T has to be longer. This number of steps to be longer.
Yes. Correct.
So that's why I wanted to know whether 100 steps is correct, or in practice, what is the 200 steps are correct. That was the first part of my observation. As regards to the second part of observation, which I felt it was relatively incorrect, because we are using two parameters again. One is e power RT and one is e power sigma root T.
Okay.
And when we are trying to do a like-to-like subtraction or addition, it should be from a like-to-like data points given to that. In one case, in the e power RT, R you are taking for the full 360 days. And in the other case, when you're taking a sigma root T, you're taking sigma for 252 days.
Correct,
so
sir.
that's the reason why I felt.
Mathematically, it doesn't sit well, but volatility is for 1 year itself.
No, I changed the data point even in the Excel. If you were to see there, e power RT minus e power sigma root T, especially for the probability that you're calculating. Okay.
Yeah.
When you're taking 252 days, a square root, and then on the other side, R, you're taking 360 days, there's a direct impact in the probabilistic estimations. So I felt either you take 360 or you take 252 days. So the return per annum that you have that you're considering per annum is definitely 360 days. So if that is 360 days, even though it's a trading days is 252 days, eventually end of the day, what you're calculating is the carrying cost. That is actually full 1 year. So it's not about number of days you actually traded, it's about how long you're holding. That's one principle. The other method is probably you could say, actually traded so long, so why should I consider 360? So that was my question. So I don't have an exact answer for that, because I felt they were not like-to-like subtraction, because the entire theoretical model never differentiated the absolute values of T. They used purely everything under the uniform basis.
Okay. Yes, sir. You may be also correct on this. Let me just go back to this historical volatility calculations. Just in case, let us assume that basically we have considered volatility and we have annualized this volatility. The problem, I would like to discuss this further, sir, because you also have a very good point of view. I wanted to gain clarity on this point of view. That's why I want to discuss further with you. Now, we have done this daily volatility calculation that goes up to the period of around 2 years or 3 years. This is our daily volatility, and these numbers, whatever we have here, are around 253 days per year. So if I take 360 here, I may be wrong. Is that correct, sir?
That's my difference here. I'm not saying whether you should change 253 or to 360 or otherwise.
Because if I put
the answer is you're annualizing things. So rule of thumb all over internet, they have said that it is 252 days. You multiply by 252, you get it.
Correct.
So I'm not questioning. The question is on the backside where you're using in the other sheet.
Now in the binomial tree model, what happens is if I consider 252 days everywhere over here, then I'm essentially saying that this company, has the year in itself as 252 or 253 days. But since this is an unlisted company, it should be open for 360 days of trading as well.
I don't have an answer for it. So even I'm thinking about it, because I have the one question that I have is, I have to subtract apples to apples. So in one case, when I'm doing e power sigma root T, I'm doing 252 days, which I'm not, with the annual I'm calling. If I'm annualizing it, it should be 360 days. So then other case, I'm only considering so 252 and 360. And that's a sizable number when I look at from a probability that is
Sir,
going to come.
one more I feel where we may be correct is the number of days that we have of data is itself 253 days
Correct.
of data, right? That is per year, 253 days of data we have. So when we are analyzing it, this 0.1% or 0.73%, these changes are only for 253 days. So if we actually do this for 253 days, we actually get 360 days of annual volatility is my understanding. As in like 1 year's annual volatility is what we get is my understanding, because we are using, if I put this as 360, then I'm saying this 1.574 what we have received as data is for 360 days itself, and I'm simply annualizing it. But if I put it for 253, I think that is the true annualized annual volatility.
I don't know. So
Yeah,
I'm
I
also.
think Anjan, you can just conclude because the other speaker is also waiting.
Oh, there's one more class, is it?
Yeah.
Okay. Final question I would like to take up is, this is the final question. How would you consider a lock-in period after the issue of shares on exercise of options? For example, employees cannot sell the shares for a period of 1 year from the date of allotment of shares. Okay, again, a very valid question because there are a lot of terms and conditions on ESOPs. But one particular concept that I'd like to bring out here is ESOPs valuation model is basically built on the concept of exercisability of option. If the fair value of the company on the date of exercising is lesser than the offer price, that is the strike price, employees are not going to subscribe at all, considering efficient market hypotheses. So our valuation model is built on exercisability of option. And secondly, if we are valuing share, or you can say the unlisted company ESOPs, whether there is a 1 year clause or not, the shares are essentially untradable. We cannot have an easy liquidity arrangement unless there is a repurchase agreement or a put option agreement. So in my opinion, but others may differ, that I do not feel that there should be any special considerations as such, because it is a post ESOP exercisable event. So I feel there should not be any special.
Anjan, this is Joyjan here. I asked this question.
Yes,
I asked this because I have seen a listed company having this clause. So they're basically stopping employees from trading in their shares.
So in case listed companies have these problem, then
and because we are fair valuing
option,
an option, but this is also a part of that option, right? So
yeah,
especially from an accounting point of view, I think it needs to get considered.
See, what we can do for a consideration here is essentially when we talk about options, option value is nothing but essentially, if we remove the concept of volatility and risk-free rate and all of that, it is nothing but intrinsic value. So in case on the option expiry date, if these options cannot be traded in the market, then we will have to forecast probably the intrinsic fair value of this share for when it becomes tradable, because that is when they can get the true use of the shares. So from there on, I think the point of option valuation can begin. The predictability of, especially when we take binomial model, we can predict the share prices for a particular time period. So I think for that predictability of time period, we can consider the ultimate fair value on the date of expiry to be the fair value on when it can be tradable. So in case of listed entities, I think we can do that. Do I need to repeat that sentence again, sir? Because it was complicated.
Yeah, partly, but also there is a factor of time value of money which comes in.
No, that I think that we should take it till the expiry itself. but the ultimate fair value of the share at the time it becomes tradability can be deferred, is what I feel. Because at the essentially we need to find the intrinsic value of the option.
No, which is true.
So intrinsic value is nothing but the fair value on the date of expiry minus the strike price. But since the ESOP conditions will get expired after 1 year of its allocation, we may consider the fair value as on the actual contractual obligation expiry date.
Okay.
Yeah. But for option valuation calculation, we need to consider it only till the expiry of option.
Now that I understand.
Yeah.
Then it's just a question of how do we extend it for 1 year.
Correct. Correct. Yeah. And in our valuation reports, we may also see what we can do is the most simplest Bayer calculation method I'm going to tell you. Then the binomial and Black-Scholes later can be adopted, but the most simplest method would be we can calculate ESOP without the assumption of first without the assumption of the clause of non-tradability is not there. Okay, let us say it comes to around 120 rupees. Then we can reduce this fair value a little bit, saying that since there is a concept of non-tradability involved, the intrinsic value of the share cannot be realized within this period. So we forecast the fair value after 1 year to be this, and bringing it down, discounting it to the present value, the returns, we are going to discount the option premium calculated till the expiry by such a percentage, maybe 1% or 2%. But that 1% and 2% can be backed by a calculation in the backend, which brings down the.
I have actually used RF for that.
Yeah. So we can
1 year RF or whatever.
Yes, we can do that. So that is a better model, easily justifiable also. Yeah. Is that okay, sir?
Yeah, that's fine.
All right. So these were the questions received here. Are there any other questions? Let me just...
Yeah, so I had actually sent one more question which probably got missed out, and which was much earlier than. So basically the question is that in your BSM model,
yeah,
you are not considering dilution of shares.
Yes.
So I use a model where where I also consider a dilution of shares. So I have to input what is the current paid up, what is the current number of shares, what is the expected allotment of shares, and then come to a number.
Yes, sir. That is a more accurate, in fact, calculation. The dilution of equity shares has to be considered, especially if the option allotment is quite huge and it is going to be affect the shareholding pattern by a lot.
So your option works code where there's a trust involved, whether share is buying the trust shares from the market, or it already holds the shares and then it is giving the shares. Then your model works good.
Correct, sir. We have to consider all these factors when in reality, when we are going and valuing this. Yes, sir. Thank you for bringing up that topic. Yeah.
Welcome. So thanks a lot.
Thank you. Yeah. So what I would like to again tell that final point, which is also quite important when you value options in reality. Once these options get exercised, there's going to be dilution in the shareholding pattern and the returns. So we need to accommodate that dilution into our fair valuations accordingly. Yes, Ravindranath sir, I think you want me to end the session. Okay.
No, we are all enjoying, but there is also one more speaker who is waiting for us. Anyhow, Anjan, it was a very good session. It was not just a question which you answered. It was question deeper into another question, not an answer deeper into another answer. Yes. You didn't let go of the people till you have fully satisfied them. We are all very happy to have attended this second round of your training. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed it. Yeah, and I'm sure all the participants have taken a lot of value out of this particular session of yours.
Yeah, thank you so much, sir. All of the participants were very informed all the topic
Yes.
already, and it helped in adding more value to the session.
Absolutely.
I also in the course learned a lot practically myself. So I thank all the participants for being so active in the sessions.